We are recorded this session. We're going to start in about 1 minute, guys. Whoever is signing, please look the instructions in the meantime. In case you need translation, please look at the instructions, select the interpretation icon on the bottom of your screen, and make sure you mute the original audio so you can hear the language of your preference. Mike, do you think you will need to share something at some point? I'm going to make a co-host just in case. All right.
Thank
But
you.
I just did it.
That's very kind of you.
So, let me see. I'm going to give another minute because people are just joining in. 1 more minute to introductions. Do you guys have any other questions before we officially start? Bring your coffees, tea, beer. I don't know.
Too late for coffee, too early for beer. So,
oh well.
Given the water situation, maybe tequila's better.
Yeah, that's true. Tequila. That's why I heard that it's a lot of agave growing now on the west. So, yeah, well, it is what it is, right?
It is. Maybe even mezcal.
Oh, that's good. Okay, stop it because
Yes, done.
okay, we are being recorded, so let's officially start. Welcome everyone to another coffee break of the Permanent Forum of Binational Waters. Just a quickly logistics for those that are just signing in. If you need translation, we have translation available. Please select the interpretation icon on the bottom of your screen. Select the language of your preference and then mute the original audio so you don't hear both languages at the same time. You only hear the language of your preference. We have a very interesting, hot, hard, strong coffee break today. The Colorado River Drought Contingency Plan and its binational implications. We know that this is very timing discussion. We know this is the year also, at least on the writing reports. We also know that time is ticking. We know that the reservoir levels in Lake Mead are not promising and actually reaching close to the threshold to make strong decisions and federal interventions in this case. So I just want to make sure that we thank our sponsors before I pass it on to Raquel, our program coordinator. I want to thank special thanks to Water Resources Research Center in Arizona for their sponsorship, Texas Water Resources Institute, the University of Texas at Austin, the North American Development Bank, the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality, TCEQ, California Water Resources Research, and Cash Abroad for all their support, because without the support, this cannot happen. So thank you for allowing us to keep discussing and bringing these topics to the binational audience. And with that, Raquel, if you don't mind, welcoming our speakers and introduce them.
Yeah, thank you, Rosario, and hello, everyone. We have another great series of our coffee break events, and we have a great lineup of speakers. I'm going to introduce them. Our first speaker is Jack Schmidt. He's the director of the Center for Colorado River Studies at Utah State University. Jack is a director of the Center for Colorado River Studies at Utah State University. He's the Emeritus Janet Queenie Lawson Chair of Colorado River Studies and has spent most of his professional life studying the Colorado River and developing strategies to improve the river's management. Between 2011 and 2014, he served as chief of the USGS Grand Canyon Monitoring and Research Center. Welcome, Jack, and thank you for being here.
Thanks, great.
Our next speaker is Gina Gilson. Gina is a postdoctoral researcher at the University of Nevada, Reno, and an incoming assistant professor in environmental and natural resource policy at Utah State. Her research broadly focuses on water governance in the American West, with an emphasis on decision-making processes and how different values and perspectives are represented. She holds a PhD and a master's in geography and environment from the University of Oxford in the UK, as well as a bachelor in biology and environmental science from Creighton University in her home state of Nebraska. Welcome, Gina.
Thanks.
We also, our next speaker is Michael Selner. He is the Chief Executive Officer of the Sonoran Institute, where he joined in October of 2020. Mike has 30 years of experience building award-winning collaborations for global organizations, including the Nature Conservancy, Dow Jones and Company, and Euromoney. Mike worked for more than 2 decades as a business journalist in the Americas, including making the shift from editor-in-chief to owner, buying Miami-based business magazine Latin Trade. Mike studied economics at Tufts University and speaks English, Spanish, and Portuguese fluently. Mike, his wife, artist and photographer Eugenia Vargas Pereira, and their dog Batuco enjoy trekking, traveling, and cooking. Welcome, Mike.
Thank you.
And just a reminder of our continuous request to all of you to support water resilience by donating to the Permanent Forum of Binational Waters through this QR code. And with your donation, we can keep working on in producing this great series of events. Without anything more, I'll give you back the word, Rosario.
Thank you, Raquel. Thank you, Gina, Mike, Jack, for joining us today with this sensitive, strong topic. And I want to open up basically for the sake of knowing where we are and what this entails. Where are we in the terms of renegotiation, the drought contingency plan of the 7 states of the Colorado River Basin? And, there's a lot of news, there's a lot of reports, there's a lot of opinions, there's a lot of misinformation too. There's too much of an information. So for the sake of the audience to understand what is going on with the drought contingency plan, can you please briefly explain to us from your perspective, from your expertise, where are we? What are the expectations of this agreement this year? And if it's okay with you guys, I'm going to start with Gina because ladies is first.
Ladies first. I love it. Thank
Ladies
you.
first.
Yeah, so to start out, I wanted to provide a little point of clarification that right now, what's going on is we're renegotiating the operating plans for the entire Colorado River Basin. And the drought contingency plans typically refers to one specific agreement that was signed in 2019. And it was the first time that all of the states had a new shortage sharing agreement really layered on top of those 2007 interim guidelines. And there have been a series of agreements ever since. But right now we are kind of waiting to see where things are going. The states have missed a couple of the big deadlines that were set by the federal government, which sort of dictated, when they were supposed to come to an agreement. And right now there isn't really an expectation or anything that the states are going to come to an agreement. And there have been a lot of, we're seeing contingency plans, for lack of a better word, of people sort of strategizing about, what we think the federal government might do, different proposals from different states. But because of how bad the snowpack has been this year, we're seeing some more drastic actions from the federal government. So typically in the past, we've heard a lot about Lake Mead, but this year it's all about Lake Powell, because in the projections for the water year, Lake Powell was projected to dip below minimum power pool where that hydropower infrastructure would no longer work. And that's really important both for the hydropower and for ensuring that the water can move downstream. Lake Powell's the upstream reservoir on the main stem on the Colorado River. And so in order to protect Lake Powell and ensure that it doesn't drip below that minimum power pool, the federal government's releasing water from upstream, and they're also withholding water at Lake Powell, so reducing the amount of water flowing out. That has repercussions in terms of how much water has passed through the measuring point at Lee's Ferry, and it's dipping below that tripwire of what is guaranteed in the Colorado River Compact, the 1922 original agreement. And so by passing that tripwire, we're seeing this risk of litigation at the same time as we're not seeing agreement on what the path forward is for the basin states, which is in some ways, that's a pretty recent development that's been happening in the last couple of weeks with the releases from Lake Powell. And to me, that's sort of signaling that things are looking pretty dire. And we've seen in the past that, with the drought contingency plans that were signed in 2019, it was that risk, that really high risk that led people to collaborate and to be willing to compromise in ways that they weren't willing to compromise before. And in 2019, it was with California agreeing to take some share of the cuts in shortage sharing. And so with that sort of unprecedented, this risk of litigation and all of this coming together, it kind of remains to be seen if that's going to stimulate cooperation. But at the moment, we're all just sort of waiting, checking our newsletters to see what's the latest.
Thank you, Gina, very much. So everything is at stake here, not just water, it's energy as well. Mike, do you want to go next on this question?
I really appreciate, Gina, the overview on the Colorado River situation. It's been quite an experience, let's call it that. I think for those of you all joining the telenovela, as it were, midstream, the episodes keep coming. And really, to be not joking, but serious, we've gone into a situation where the state governments and the federal government are doing the best they can to try to find a way forward. And the elements of it are the same that have gotten us to here: collaboration, flexibility, and shared responsibility across the basin. This has been one of the hallmarks of the Colorado River Basin in terms of people have managed to work together over decades. And that's really amazing given the sense that, water is vital. What has changed in terms of what's going on now is nature is setting the pace now. So whereas before we were talking about how much water each place would get because of their rights and millions of acre feet, now nature's just saying, hey, you can do whatever you want to do, but I'm going to do what I need to do with the amount of water I have going first. So hydrology is going to be the final negotiator here, with all due respect to the states, the federal government, Mexico, the tribal nations. That's kind of where we're at right now. And so to Gina's point, 2019 was kind of a test run on, there's not going to be enough water. We got to do something. And me being the journalist, I know the story that's coming forward. You're going to get the bathtub ring analysis at Lake Mead, Lake Powell, of how the water goes down, and you can see where the level is according to the bathtub ring. Then you'll get to the point what Gina's talking about in terms of, will we have a problem with power and people losing power? And if we don't do anything soon enough, we'll get to perhaps the biggest photo opportunity, which would be the Grand Canyon with no water running through the bottom of it. And that's kind of extreme, but again, the journalist in me says that's kind of the bellwether of, are we able to find a way forward? On the upside, sustainable agreements, as I mentioned, have been possible in the past, and they're going to require the basin states, the tribal nations, Mexico, water users, environmental stakeholders, everybody to work together to reduce flows and growing uncertainty. So we're going to move from temporary shortage responses towards long-term adaptive management. That's in the ideal world. And so I think the real principle that will guide us going forward is healthy rivers and healthy communities will go hand in hand. And so if we can get there, that'll be the ideal outcome. We're still a ways away, and we're still managing through challenges with the policy structures, the rights people have to water, things of this sort that really limit our ability to change the way we've been managing. But as I say, nature is really going to say, I don't care what your rules are. I'm just going to do what I do because I've got less water, and this is the way it's going to go. Whether you want to adapt or not is up to you. Jack, what do you think?
Thank you, Mike. Jack. Now,
Well,
what is going to happen?
it's hard to supplement this. You both have been comprehensive. So let me just try to solidify a few points that Gina and Mike have made. The first one, I think, is that, at least from my perspective, there are two different crises. One is the inability of the basin states in the United States to come to agreement. And that has been the case for many years. The understanding that there needed to be a comprehensive sulution that would be implemented at the end of this year has been known we've known this deadline for many, many years. And we made essentially no progress on this in the Biden administration. And we've made relatively little progress in this administration. And so that has gotten everyone's attention. And the Bureau of Reclamation developed a huge environmental impact statement to look at alternatives and strategies. And what is important is that in that EIS, the alternatives that were proposed in that EIS, Reclamation found that none of the alternatives worked under dry or critically dry scenarios, which just happens to be where we're at. So we had a comprehensive environmental impact statement that proposed a bunch of alternatives that didn't actually work. So that's a problem. The second point to be made here is that is what has gotten all the press coverage for the last many years. A few of us have been relentlessly writing papers for the last 2 years that said, stop, all of you lawyers arguing about negotiations. We have a real water crisis today, right now, and this is going to be right in front of us. It was conveniently ignored. Everyone hoped that it would snow. Everyone hoped that we would have efficient runoff. It didn't happen. And so now we have a real water crisis at the same time that we have a political negotiating crisis. And the problem is the real water crisis constrains what the political options are. Because when your back is against the wall, you're having to manage the system from a crisis mentality. So keep those two different issues separate. They've come together now, but for the last several years, a few of us have been voices in the wilderness warning of this, but largely ignored. But there you go. The other point I would make is right now, because of this immediate water crisis, the federal government has said we're stepping in because we have to protect the structures. And we don't care if there's no political crisis negotiation. We are going to have to make decisions right now. And the decision to increase releases from Flaming Gorge Dam, that's a federal government against the objections of the Upper Basin states to say, sorry, this is what we're doing. And to risk litigation from Arizona by reducing the releases out of Lake Powell, fine. If Arizona wants to sue because you're below some threshold, fine. No court is going to intervene against the Bureau of Reclamation when they say you're threatening the integrity of structures. So we have this precedent of what's going to happen, how much will the federal government intervene? And then lastly, we have this continuing effort by groups of states to say, we need to intervene. We're going to step up, and here's our proposal. And Thursday, so less than a week ago, the lower basin states said, all right, here's our proposal for the whole basin. So that's sort of where we're at now. But even if we don't reach a political agreement here, we have a real water crisis here, and that has to be dealt with. There you go.
Nice.
Thank you. Thank you, Jack. It's like living in parallel dimensions, right? Of the same issue. So going to the next point or the next round of discussions, and if you have a magical glove in front of you and knowing what you know, what is really feasible? Both, considering the political and the physical conditions right now. What is really feasible? What is really the scenario that we're going to see? Because we need to see something soon, right? According to what is required. So what are the most feasible scenarios? And I'm going to start with Gina again.
Okay, I'm happy to let someone else go first if we want to alternate. But I think because and I'll save the bigger picture, like what the magic wand would be for Mike and Jack. I think you two will have maybe some better insights on that. What I've been thinking about more is what's realistic, and what might actually happen, and what I think we can do, because so much of what we hear about is these bigger negotiations that are happening between the states. It's up to, just these principals, principal negotiators and politicians, and everyone's having to filter through all of the interest groups in their states. And that's a really difficult position. And I would love to see something, more realistic around living with a smaller river rather than trying to get by on, the agreements that we've had and kicking the can down the road in terms of making those bigger structural changes. So I have daydreams about what those bigger structural changes could be. But I think in the meantime, states also have a lot that they should be working on, and adjusting to living with less water within their own borders, the boundaries of their states. And we've seen a lot of success with this, I think, in cities. Cities are often using junior water rights, and they are taking more proactive measures to make sure that they're conserving. So we have behavioral interventions, trying to get people to use less, incentives for people to stop watering their lawns quite as much, et cetera. And so across the Colorado River Basin, we've seen a lot of that, and we're seeing more of it. There's been some news in the past week or so about Arizona, both Phoenix and Tucson, taking additional steps to, think about what it might look like if they don't have as much Colorado River water coming through. But I think applying those same principles to senior water rights users is also important. And so far, we've done a lot, and a lot of the successes have been around using water more efficiently, but that's not necessarily what's best for the system. There's this paradox that many people who study this know about, that using water more efficiently in irrigation actually increases the amount of water that you use overall, because instead of having these inefficient methods where water runs back into the environment that can be used for downstream users or for the environment, you're really efficiently using every single drop. And ultimately, those efforts to use water more efficiently aren't the same as using less water overall. And so there have been some efforts to maybe use less water. And I think Utah has been a leader in that, and with their demand management pilot project. And I was just rereading. So demand management projects generally, I think, will be important to consider moving forward. And in the Colorado River Basin, we often hear about the system conservation pilot project that was led at the federal level. And I was just reading a report from, again, it was published, I think, 3 years ago from the University of Wyoming. It was led by Drew Bennett. It was a survey of water users in the upper and lower basin. And when asked about what that could look like, a demand management project, it was the vast majority of respondents, I think over 73%, said they wanted that to happen locally. And so far, if that big effort that happened was federally, that is kind of a mismatch in terms of what irrigators might respond to and water users might respond to. So I think states still have a lot that they can do to think about providing the support for local irrigation districts or local entities or even regional actors to be thinking about how to ultimately reduce the amount of water that we use.
And agriculture. So, Mike, what does your gut say? Potentially, what are the scenarios? What are the feasible scenarios
Well, I'm going to
that
echo a lot about what Gina has said, and excuse me for interrupting. It's a very similar story in terms of when you think about conservation is no longer an option. We need to go down the road of conservation. You're looking at things like water reuse, groundwater sustainability, watershed restoration, long-term planning for lower flows. All of that has to enter the mix at a state or a tribal or a Mexican state level ideology. It has to go through the process. As Gina said, many of the cities have done an amazing job of lowering per capita consumption. They've doubled in size and used less water. Ag has been a less favorable story in the sense that they're getting more efficient with water, but it's not leading to overall reduced demand. So they're using that extra water to grow more. And so I think that's part of the dynamic we'll see. I think one of the things that's definitely going to come to the fore is the fact that the cities are where the political power is. And agriculture's had substantial power over the years and has senior water rights in places like Imperial Valley and Yuma. But I think you're going to begin to see a negotiation, and you have seen some of this between the cities and ag. And they're going to have to work it out. Some cases, just cities are growing into agricultural lands, and that's converting. A Front Range, West Slope conversation in Colorado, very familiar in terms of what the water is going to be used for. Is it going to be pumped over the mountains, or is it going to be kept in that basin? And that's really, the story that's playing out throughout the Colorado River Basin. We'll see that more and more going forward, and I would think that what that's going to do is going to put pressure on legal rights, how people use water, where they can use the water, are the rights tied to the land. All of that story is going to get more and more intense as there's a transition towards how water is going to be used and how it's being used now, based on scarcity. That's what's going to drive the story. I think, coming from the Sonoran Institute's perspective, we work at the local level. We work at community-based conservation. So we work with communities, helping them find ways to become more resilient, use less water. And from our perspective, that is the way forward. Unfortunately, waiting for the federal government or even a state level government to come right in and come to the rescue isn't going to happen for most of these communities. They don't have the resources. Nobody's telling them how it's going to work. Nothing. In our Growing Water Smart program, we have a wonderful track record of working with these communities, helping them get to where they need to be. And we're finding that that's becoming a sub-regional strategy in terms of you can see how communities get together and they begin to see that the water needs, where they're getting their water from, is under siege, and can they bring together the different actors within their watersheds and sometimes connected watersheds when there's trans watershed sharing to figure out a way forward. And it's not ideal, it's not at the basin level, but it's building something that people can do now as they wait for this bigger solution to work itself out. Things like ag, I think part of it is demographics. Many people who work on the farm are getting older, and the younger generation doesn't want to do farming anymore. So that's going to lead to a natural transition. But that's going to take time. And most of these communities don't have that time, and they need to do something now. And from our experience, the best way has been defined local action to build regional resilience. That's from where we found the most sort of optimistic and encouraging trends in the current situation as we look forward.
Thank you, Mike. Do you want to give the word to Jack?
Jack, what did we forget?
Those are great. Let me try to be maybe a little bit more specific. I'm going to speak in the immediate and in the long term. In the immediate, what are the basic hangups in negotiating a long-term agreement? What has to happen? The upper basin states must eventually agree to making mandatory and enforceable cuts in their use. To date, they refuse to. To date, the upper basin states say, we use half of what the lower basin states use. We'll be damned if we're going to make a commitment to reduce our use at all. You can understand the logic of that. Of course, the lower basin says, are you out of your mind? 20 million of the 40 million people who depend on the Colorado River live in California, for heaven's sakes. We've got the biggest economies. We can only cut so much. We're not going to reach an agreement unless the upper basin states eventually agree to enforceable cuts. To date, they refuse. Is that achievable? I see no way around it without that. So there you go. In terms of long-term agreement, long-term changes, I want to get a little more specific on this use of the word agriculture. 55% of the water used in the Colorado River Basin is used to grow livestock feed. Let's stop talking about agriculture as some vague concept. For heaven's sakes, more than half of the water is used to grow alfalfa and grass hay. That's not a water crisis at all. Anybody in the humid parts of the United States would listen to this and say, you have an archaic legal structure that doesn't allow you to do what you need to do. But this is not hard. This is all about the need to grow less livestock feed, my heavens. That is the longer term discussion that needs to go on. Let's get specific in the lower basin. The Imperial Irrigation District uses more water in 1 year than does any other state in the basin. The annual consumptive use by the Imperial Irrigation District is greater than the state of Arizona, is greater than the state of Colorado. The garden produce that the nation depends on, that is grown by the Imperial Irrigation District, is grown in November, December, January, and February. Those are the lowest months. Those are the lowest consumptive water use months in the year. Consumptive water use by IID goes up 3 times in the summer, right now, May, June, July. The only crops that are grown there in the summer are alfalfa and grass hay, not broccoli and onions. So that's not a hard problem to solve, except for this small problem of the law. As Tina Shields once said to me, hey, we got this water fair and square. You want to pay for it? That's fine. But it's our water. Sorry. And so how was the American West settled? It was settled by agriculturalists. So in a world of first in time, first in right, who has the senior water rights? The entities who grow grass and alfalfa now. And so the problem is that we have to completely change the structure of laws. And you tell me in this dysfunctional country of the United States that we have now, how we're ever going to take on those big issues. In the lower basin, the problem is the most vulnerable entities are the municipalities, primarily the Central Arizona Project. It has the most junior rights. And the Central Arizona Project is trying hard. In March and April of 2026, the last 2 months, based on the annual accounting reports, CAP has taken less water than in any of the last 15 years. CAP is doing all it can, but you can only drop use of water. You can only drop use so far when you're supplying the fifth largest city in the United States as well as Tucson. So that's where there's going to have to be, there's only so much you can still reduce in urban areas. It's all about agriculture. It's about fallowing, deficit irrigation, crop switching, whatever it is, and making irrigation more efficient. So and then I guess the last thing is, to me, is a long-term issue. There's got to be interstate and and basin to basin water marketing. It's absurd that you can't reduce agricultural use in the upper basin and route that water to the lower basin. That's all prohibited. But again, that's long term. So to go back, and in the near term, this is all going to be about the upper basin agreeing to buy in. The lower basin has said we'll reduce the majority of the cuts, but the obligation of the upper basin can't be zero. And that's the negotiation position now, and that's where we're stuck, in which case the feds will just intervene. It's likely the feds are going to keep releases out of PAL low for the next couple of years. Those are my thoughts. Thanks.
Thank you, Jack. As NatBank officer Salvador said on their last NatBank Water Summit, he said we won't be able to do anything on the water crisis if we don't deal with agriculture first. Because there's just so much that cities can do, right? But the big burden relies on where it is. It's in the border is close to 80%. So it's even worse at that scale. I know Sam is connected, and I know he wants to say something before we get into the binational implications. So I see him moving, when he start doing this, it's like he wants to jump in. So Sam, do you want to say something before
no,
we
I
get
was,
into the implications?
I was just enjoying the conversation. I'm really glad that we are talking the serious issues and just being specific. I think that is very important. I don't know. I think Jack, Mike, Gina, thanks for the insights. With Jack, I was like 2 months ago or 4 months ago. Like a year ago, we were in Colorado, in Denver, and we were discussing some of these. Perhaps we talked about that we don't have a problem of water. We have a problem of priorities, or what we are prioritizing. And the same with Mike in other ones. I just want to appreciate that you are talking very open. The inconvenience of the law, right? Like, oh man, if we have the magic wand. Anyway, more than that, I'm extremely delightful.
Thank you, Sam. So let's get to the binational implications, if we may, because the drought contingency plan had the binational element on it, meaning 323 and then later 330. with water shortages on water deliveries to the Mexico side. So knowing and understanding the complexity, the already hugely complex decision-making process on the US side. Now, how do you see this moving now into the obligations with Mexico and how that looks like for Mexico, I would say, or water allocations under the 1944 treaty that will have to happen too. So there's no way around that too. And I guess the expectations are already clear that more shortages will come. That we know. We don't need a magic ball to see that coming. So what are your stake on that, your thoughts on that, Gina? Do you want to comment on
Yeah.
that first?
I'm happy to start. And I think calling back to one of the first things Mike said is that in the basin, agreement and collaboration, coming to mutual agreement has been really the norm. I think one of the biggest success stories has been all of these agreements signed between the United States and Mexico. And I've done some work on international river basins more generally, and the relationship and the treaty, the 1944 treaty between the US and Mexico stands out for being unique, for having that minute process that we're able to amend the treaty and keep the treaty safe and protect the treaty and try new things without threatening what's happening between the two countries. And it's been cool to learn about. I also love the analogy of coming into a telenovela and trying to catch up and seeing what happened in the previous seasons. And it's just really expanded. I think those minutes have really expanded, and the scope of what's possible has expanded. I think, there was and they've often responded to different crises, like the 2010 earthquake that set that new precedent for Mexico to store water within the US. We've seen environmental NGOs be part of these minutes. And so what's possible has really expanded over time. And because they're shorter term, there's the opportunity to take maybe some risks or try something new. And as we saw with the 2019 drought contingency plans, Mexico did agree to share in shortage and really sign on to the plan that the states had agreed to, and actually agreed to their piece of the puzzle before the states came together. And that kind of feels like similar to what we're seeing now, that it's such a priority to understand what's going to happen on the US side that it feels difficult to know what the implications are for Mexico as of yet. And that's true not just for Mexico, but for other sovereign nations and the tribal nations. But I think generally speaking, because it really is up to the US and the states to get their agreement in order, and then Mexico will and always has been willing to, take part in that and be a part of that process. And so I would expect that that's what we're going to see as well. It's just a question of what their participation looks like. And maybe, Mike and Jack will have more specific insights on what that looks like.
Thank you, Gina. Particularly on the current context of the US-Mexico relationship, which is not easy, is tense, and water has been contaminated by other topics too. So this is kind of for me, it's a threshold, right? Before and after 2026 water between US and Mexico. Mike, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I echo a lot of what Gina says. Really, Gina, I think you hit the nail on the head in terms of the agreement between Mexico and the United States when it comes to water is a global model. It really is impressive what has been achieved. And I know there's a political context that sets everything on fire in terms of drugs and, the whole thing. But at its essence, this is held. This has been the one positive story that we have heard going forward between the United States and Mexico through Republican, Democrat, any administration you want to choose, it's gone forward. And I think that's really valuable and important because it's going to be important going forward. The context right now is challenging, both of the U.S.-Mexico relations in terms of how those are going. NAFTA is being blown up. You've had even skirmishes around the Rio Grande in terms of water releases. You have all the elements to make this really get really combative. And yet, to date, folks have been working together to try to move this forward. I think one of the important context here, beyond what's happening in the United States, is what's happening in Mexico. Mexico right now has a really interesting process taking part in terms of they're trying to reform their water laws and what's going on with water. And that creates probably more tension on the Mexican side than what's going to happen with the Colorado River at this point because it's happening sooner. So the Mexican farmer is looking at this and saying, wait, I'm being told from the north that I'm going to get less water, and I'm being told from the south in Mexico City that they may be taking some of these water rights because I'm not using them adequately. So that sets the Mexican farmer and the people in the Mexicali Valley in a real pressure cooker, and there will be tension. There already has been tension. If you were to sit outside the Conagua offices of the National Water Commission office in Mexicali, I'm sure you would see protests, if not every day, every other day, somebody marching in front of their offices saying, you've got to stop doing this to us. Whether it's the US side, whether it's the Mexico side, for them, it's the same part of the same recipe. All of that said, back to what Gina says, in terms of you look at what's been going on in the Colorado River Delta, a group of governments, NGOs, and others with less than 1% of the flow has been able to reestablish the Colorado River's connection to the sea more than 200 days out of the year. That's a huge success. They restored more than 1,500 acres of forest land in that area. So what you see is, yes, I hear you when you say that this is going to be combative. Will Mexico leave more water in Lake Mead like they've done in the past? And they probably will. But on a local level, what sort of benefits will Mexico see from the water it's getting and how it's used? And that's really important because water is becoming the single largest commodity on either side of the border in terms of how we treat it. And so when you look at some of the biggest contentious issues, it's around wastewater. And all of the focus has been on waste. I can guarantee you in the next 15 years, it'll be focused on water. In terms of the ability to clean that water, keep it out of, Baja California's and California's beaches, the wastewater flowing in, make it reusable, and all of a sudden you've got a new source of water. And I think that's going to lead to a lot more cooperation, binational cooperation, when people say, okay, we can actually turn this water into usable water. As we've seen on the Santa Cruz River, we've got more than 40 miles of flowing river because effluent is being treated and put back into the river. As we've seen in Mexicali, we're running a 3-mile pilot, and you've been able to get water to international standards with relatively small amounts of money and just community engagement. So I think there is a path forward. I think the Mexican side of this is going to be contentious more because of what's going on in Mexico than necessarily than what's going on with the Colorado River negotiations, because right now the federal government in Mexico is pushing through reforms that the farmers are worried about as well.
I have to say that I agree with you. I think Mexico has bigger problems inside than outside with the US. So that's the origin of everything. Jack, what are your thoughts on this?
First off, I just want to say it's been a privilege in my life to have some opportunity to work on binational issues. Sam and I first had crossed paths decades ago, and it was one of the greatest experiences in my life to spend 15 years of my life working in the Big Bend region of the Rio Grande and Rio Bravo. And I was lucky enough to be at Morelos Dam when the Pulse Flow was released in 2014 and play a significant role for the federal government in the science plans there. So this is all dear to my heart, even though I've spent, I guess, more of my career further upstream. To be efficient, I'm just going to share one slide, un momento.
Yes.
Okay. So I've actually thought a lot about this, and I have a little writing group. You might recognize the names who are the authors, and we write stuff, and we all have done things in our careers that sort of matter, and now we write things. And this paper that we released at the end of March is nearly 30 pages long and is exhaustive and detailed in examining the treaty, the 1944 treaty, the minutes, and we propose going forward that the treaty with Mexico be revised, and that instead of a fixed amount, that we negotiate with Mexico a proportion of the natural flow at Lee's Ferry, and that's where we ought to go forward. But you can just download this long paper at the websites of the Kyle Center at ASU or any of these other centers, or the Center for Colorado River Studies. It's on the main page. So if you just do a Google search on Center for Colorado River Studies, you'll find that paper. So that's more detail than I can provide here. Let me just make a few other points. Everybody's known that we need Mexican buy-in for a comprehensive post-26 agreement. And yet, no negotiations were started with Mexico until the very end of last year. So it's like we're way late. We're way late in even beginning the conversations with Mexico. But at the December meeting in Las Vegas, the Colorado River Water Users meeting, the representatives of the Mexican government made a commitment that Mexico understands they're in this game as well. Mexico has consistently accepted that they have to be part of the solution, and that Mexico will be willing to take some reduction in use in exchange for storage in Lake Mead and probably financial support as well. But the nature of that is up for grabs. In the latest lower basin proposal that was released last Friday, the lower basin just said, and we assume that Mexico is going to take 250,000 acre foot cut, just sort of an arbitrary number. I don't know whether anybody asked Mexico or not, but at some point there's going to have to be a careful negotiation. And so whether it's a proportion of the natural flow, and you can read our paper and see our argument there, or whether it's going to be a fixed cut, Mexico's in the game. So that's important. Obviously, another issue that is in the background for all of this is whether going forward, the issues of the drought and management of the Colorado River, and who feels the pain of reducing water use in the Colorado River, whether that is tied to the situation on the Rio Grande, Rio Bravo. They're in the same treaty. And as we all know, the United States users in Texas are downstream of the water source in the Rio Conchos. So everything's flipped. And there is this constant tension about whether the issues of the Rio Grande, Rio Bravo, and the Rio Colorado are tied together or separate. The basins of the states of the Rio Colorado do not want any part of linkage to the Rio Grande because they're afraid there'll be a quid pro quo on that. But realize that sits in the background. Two other things that are scary in all this. We know that the Trump administration cut off Tijuana's access to better quality water. That was a terrible decision, 6 months ago. And perhaps the scariest thing is I know of talks, informal talks that have gone on in Washington, D.C. amongst people who used to have power and don't have power anymore, but who with the United States and Mexico, that said maybe we ought to just start talking about what's going to happen potentially with water issues if the worst happens between U.S. Mexico relations. I mean, I really can't go into any more detail, but it's like there are like terrible scenarios of what the US government might do in Mexico. And it's like, what would happen? And, what is the worst? That's a little scary. The last thing is this. I do think that it is important to distinguish when we talk about water crossing the international border. I think it's important to distinguish two issues. What is the total amount of water that crosses the NIB and then is available at Morelos Dam to be diverted there to the Reforma Canal and off to the ag fields? That's a different issue to whether or not any water dribbles past Morelos Dam and goes downstream. Now, right now, what we've learned is that you can't get water past the southern half of the Limmatroph. And so, how are the natural plantings of natural vegetation plantations in the delta being maintained? They're being maintained by routing water through the ditches of the irrigation system because you can't get it through the sandy area just upstream of San Luis. And of course, Mexico is going to be in an argument that says, how much water do we have and how much is going to is available to go to Tijuana or to the Mexicali ag fields, right? But that's a different issue than the delta issues. Now, I would submit that allocating water for the delta really represents the enlightened, truly from a perspective of environmental justice, doing the right thing. In a world in which we don't have enough water and declining runoff, you're going to allocate water to the environment at the downstream end? That's crazy, right? Except it's the right thing to do. And there's a big disagreement when I talk to the kind of people I talk to. And some people, hardcore people in the state of Arizona, say, that's not our problem. The Mexicans want to fix the delta. They can allocate some of their 1.5 million to the delta, which I think is like incredibly irresponsible. We're the source of the problem. We use 90% of the water, but there are people who don't think that way. And I do think that the issues of the delta are going to have to be argued differently. And they're going to have to lead to a better sense of basin-wide responsibility, that all of the United States is responsible also for the health of the delta in Mexico. But I would just submit that's a different issue than the issue of how much water crosses the NIB for utilitarian use by cities and agriculture. And so you might want to distinguish those two issues as you think forward. Enough from me. There you go.
So it's a complex wicket issue, both internally in both countries. Each country has its own wicket issues, while the physical challenge remains. I'm gonna Randy Hansen just shared with us another paper too. Jack, I would, if you are able, to send the link to your paper in the chat so people can access that easily. And Randy Hansen also shared a publication related to Mexicali Valley, using mudflow and effects on agriculture activities and groundwater levels and recharge. We heard
Hello,
there's a
Randy.
lot of
It's good to hear you.
yeah. Thank you,
Hello,
Randy.
Randy.
Yeah, and I mean we can also keep it posted on the website. Randy, go ahead.
Oh, I was just really going to quickly say the other thing that I'm not sure has gotten accounted for, and I actually was working with the Bureau of Reclamation down there while I was at the USGS, and that is that we were developing an optimization model because, and I was just going to add this to they are taking additional saline waters pumped from the Gila and the Yuma valleys to prevent soil zone waterlogging, and they were delivering that at the southern delivery in lieu of Colorado River water, and their operations people were tearing their hair out trying to figure out how to do this more automatically. And so we were trying to develop an optimization model that would allow them which of these wells to turn on and off in the Yuma and the Gila Valley to deliver this additional water in lieu of Colorado River water. So I'm not sure that's being accounted for in the treaty negotiations and the treaty accountings. I've heard several different answers on that, but I just thought I'd just mention it because it was a significant amount of water, and that's different from the minute 214 wells that are right on the Binational line there of the border, the frontera.
Just to follow up on what Randy said, in the lower basin proposal, which of course that's also part of the negotiations. It's not like that proposal is going to be just accepted across the board, but the lower basin called for studies of a couple key infrastructure issues. And one of them was all three states called for detailed studies and investment to increase the efficiency of water use in the infrastructure in the Yuma area. There was a real explicit call out of conditions in Yuma and sort of saying we've got to figure out how to use that water more efficiently. Obviously, from the state of Arizona's standpoint, you've got to make water use in Yuma more efficient if you're going to have a hope of getting more water into the CAP.
Yeah, and I just wanted to also mention, I think something else that this brings up, at least the title of I'm looking forward to looking at this paper, is the issue of groundwater and groundwater depletion, which is something that's sort of easy to overlook in all of this because our discussions are always about surface water. But when surface water is low, less available, people typically turn to supplemental pumping of groundwater, and that can have unknown implications. And I think it's worth mentioning that most of what we've talked about today is surface water, but if we continue on the path that we're on, it's going to lead to further groundwater depletion, which isn't accounted for at the basin scale, and could lead to pretty severe impacts, especially, I forget what it was. I was reading something earlier this week about the percentage of Colorado River water that comes from groundwater. And Jack, you might know those numbers off the top of your head better than I do, but it's not insignificant.
Yeah, right. Yep.
Absolutely.
Great point. Great point, Gina.
We always want to talk about groundwater, but we are never, I mean, it's never enough.
Yeah.
We have so many issues at surface water level. It's the same with the Rio Grande. I mean, we already have in big trouble to talk about groundwater, but I guess groundwater is not waiting. It's not waiting, and it's not doing any better in either of both basins. I know, Sam, you shared another publication. You want to mention that?
Yeah, and I think like 2-3 months ago, we talked with Jay Famiglietti. I can provide the podcast, and he was presenting the groundwater overdraft in the Colorado River. He makes a call that we have to be aware, talked about surface water, but groundwater should be also on the table, as Gina is mentioning. So anyway, yes, you know what, Rosario, I'm trying to think this positive because we are just seeing the Rio Bravo troubles, issues that we have, and then having this discussion. I do think really this is I might be wrong, but I think this is more a political willpower. I don't know issue, because I mean what I'm seeing from all of you is that you have thought, you have very well structured thoughts on how things can be improved. You are putting proposals in the table. And to me, it's like, why are we in such a dire condition because of this, right? I don't know. But I think perhaps in this is that there are things in science that we can still work. But to me, this looks like more a political willpower. And that's the part that, because it is really out of my hands. Like, if there is something that we can do scientifically, sure, we can have at it. Anyways.
Well, I think it's easier to share water than to share scarcity. And this is an issue of sharing scarcity. Who's going to pay for it? I mean, paying it not just economically, it's socially, politically as well. So I think who's willing to give up, and nobody's actually seems to be very enthusiastic of giving in something, especially, you know, when economics and politics gets into place. What are your thoughts, guys, in terms of this point brought by Sam, and apart from we don't have a water issue, we have a priority issue. And it looks like we need long term. So I mean, we cannot change this year or next year. It's a long term change. Are we on time? Do we have time for that? Is the system, the physical system, allowing us for that? I don't know. I'll leave it open. Who wants to jump in?
I think that's basically what's going on here in terms of we're saying we're going to do this, that, or the other, and we're not getting it done. As Gina and Jack pointed out, we blew through deadlines for the last 2 years without getting anything done because I'm not going to cede anything. I'm going to get my way, and they'll see nature is just rolling on. We had, 25% of the snowpack in Colorado this year, and guess what? I was in Denver a couple months ago, and they've got water rationing in Denver. In Denver. Hello. I mean, down here in Arizona, I could see that, but in Denver. So I think reality's catching up with them. And, the federal government stepped in, as Jack pointed out. This is crisis management of the water. And you're talking about 6 million acre feet this year for the lower basin. That's serious. That's 1.5 million you just cut, and you didn't get anybody's approval. You didn't ask anybody permission. If that's really the way it's going to play, you can keep talking about what's going to happen. And effectively, I think, as we all know, there will be litigation, and there'll be litigation going on forever. While the reality is people start to take decisions to make the water usage fit the water available. And that's how I feel like nature's just going to win. If you can't get to agreement, I'll make the decision for you and get you to prioritize according to what I need to do.
Yeah.
Nature and then the federal government, I guess. Gina.
Right.
I was just going to agree. It sure feels like, it's all catching up to us, but there's not really another option. Like, yeah, it's too late, but we still have to work within that. And when I think about the lack of political will and those challenges of getting everyone to agree to something, I mean, as you said, there are so many great ideas out there, and there have just been more and more reports of new things that we could try or approaches we could take, but it's so hard to generate the will to do that. Partly, I think, because of the scale and the risk involved of someone agreeing to do something and others not following through, or just the risk that presents. But one thing that's been kind of helping me and feel a little less pessimistic is just thinking about the different levels of agency, that it doesn't all have to happen at the basin scale. And so I think we're going to see more and more of that is what can we actually do? And Mike spoke to this really well earlier. What can we actually do locally in ways that can kind of scale up or set a precedent or just kind of change what's possible, and generate that political will through showing what is possible bit by bit. But it sure is easy to feel pessimistic by where we don't have agency, which is that huge, huge scale of the whole basin.
I was wondering, I added another post there, and can I show a quick slide real quick? Would that be okay? Just to give you an idea of another context of what's going on in the lower Colorado that I think a lot of people have overlooked.
Yeah, give me a minute. Just let me. I know Jack wanted to say something, and then we'll
I'm
go
sorry.
with you,
Sure.
Randy.
No. I'd look forward to what Randy's got, but I just make two observations on this. One is one thing that genuinely bothers me about the negotiations in the United States is the fact that the common citizen has not been given agency to participate in this discussion. What has happened is that we have presumed that this is so technical and that it's so complicated that we really just have to let the negotiators work behind closed doors to come up with an agreement. And what that has done is that has sidelined the opinions of the American citizens. And not to pick on the upper basin, but I live in Utah, but I'm generally distrusted by the upper basin states. Here would be an example of why citizens are not being given agency. What is the upper basin state's position? The upper basin state's position is we got a raw deal. We need to have rights to use more water. Okay. And from a utilitarian standpoint, that makes sense. But nobody asks the citizens of the upper basin whether they want more water in their rivers. Nobody ever said, well, nobody ever points out the most fundamental point. The further downstream in the basin someone uses water, that means more water stays in the rivers to provide ecosystem services all the way down to get there. And that is never said. And the common citizen is left as if we're all in St. Peter's Square waiting to see white smoke come out of the chimney. But we have no idea what is going on. I think this has been a fundamentally flawed negotiation, only involving lawyers and technocrats behind the scenes who are arguing only for utilitarian values and use. And I think that that is a fundamental problem. Now, when it comes to the US negotiating with Mexico, that can't be. I mean, obviously, it has to be government to government. That's a different deal. But within the United States, anyway, that's a point. The other point is this little writing group that I'm part of. That we put out an important paper last September, and we just did a simple mass balance for the basin and said, here's a scenario, and here's how bad we could be if it's another dry winter. Well, here we are. And we're in the process of revisiting that right now. And we're going to write another paper, and our deadline is to get this out in early June. But one point is that we have always talked about reservoir storage from the concept of active storage, meaning every drop of water that is above dead pool. But of course, the reality is well above dead pool, you've got really big problems in managing the system. At Glen Canyon Dam, we're not going to just use a river outlet works. If you can't pass water through the power plant, you've got a whole host of problems in terms of how much water you release downstream. Right now, we're draining Flaming Gorge. That's only added another 3 million acre feet to the bank account. If you look at the amount of realistically accessible storage that's above 1,000 feet in Lake Mead, above 3,500 in Lake Powell, or is available above minimum power pool at Flaming Gorge, if next winter is another acutely dry winter, we're in full-on 5-alarm fire drill crisis. I mean, we are full-on in crisis. And if next year is a repeat of 2023, the third wettest winter that we had, will only get us to where we are right now. Because total consumptive water use in the basin is about 12.5 million acre feet. Unless we show a capacity to greatly reduce total basin consumptive use, we are not out of this. We would need to have 1920 or 2023 again and again and again and again. And that ain't happening. We only get one-off wet years. And so the fundamental need to greatly reduce consumptive use remains. We're not really solving this. So we're not going to get out of this problem, even if we have a wet year. Randy, what do you got?
A couple
Yes,
things.
Randy, what do you got?
What's ironic is that go back to the book that I helped write with Alfonso Rivera on the transboundary management of transboundary aquifers in the Americas. We did a chapter, Ruben Chavez and myself and some others, and we actually estimated how much the groundwater underflow was, which was on the order of about 60,000 acre feet a year across the border, and mainly leakage from the All-American Canal. But the other thing that a lot of people don't look at is the climate aspects, and Jack has mentioned a little bit of it. I just wanted to show you, this is a slide that I commonly use. There's a really great paper by Tim Osena et al. From 2009, and he really looks at the various climate forcings that have occurred in this area, and in particular ENSO, PDO, and AMO, and then combinations of those. And really, you get 20 to 40% more stream flow during these wetter times. There's about a 20 to 80% difference between wet and dry conditions, and about a 20 to 60% less flow under these conditions here. So that increased stream flow is warm PDO and cold AMO. AMO drives drought. El Nino and warm PDO, or El Nino with a cold AMO, also give you better stream flow. And then decreased stream flow is cold PDO and warm AMO, or La Nina and a cold PDO, which is a wet PDO, and then La Nina and a warm AMO also deprive. So anyway, so these are some of the climate variability issues that have occurred over there that really I don't think are being taken into account in these larger timeframes. And the AMO cycle is anywhere from 30 to 60 years. PDO is 10 to 30 years, and so on. So it's not all about ENSO. And the irony is that when we were working in that area, supposedly, and I'll stop with this, that there was a complaint from the government of Mexico that's somewhere lost in the USGS field office there in Yuma, complaining about too much water coming across the border. And that's when they built the Andrade drain to capture some of that. Anyway, it's gone back and forth, but it's had several phases of one side or the other not being happy with the sharing of water. I'll stop with that. But anyway, just thought I'd share that. The climate stuff is really important.
Truly. And according to predictions, this year we're supposed to have a very strong El Nino coming up pretty soon. So thank you, Randy, for that. I also wanted to share that Todd Butler also shared a paper here talking about litigation. I know Mike brought that up. Yeah, there's going to be a lot of action in the courts. And this is a case study in the Rio Grande that we can learn from in case this is coming up to this side of the border as well. And thank you, Todd, for sharing that. It's available. The link is available in the chat. We're reaching the end of time, but not the end of time. I mean, the end of this coffee break. So dramatic, guys. Come on, you're getting me to the end of times here. So I just wanted to ask you for your last thoughts, the speaker's last thoughts, so we can wrap it up. How do you want to wrap it up, your intervention for this topic today? Who wants to start? I'll leave it open. No, not democracy here? Okay. Gina, you want to wrap it up?
Sure. Yeah. I think some of the comments I said earlier is how I'd probably want to wrap it up is a little bit of a case for optimism. And I had practice in this teaching last semester. Our semester just finished, of trying not to end every class on a note of doom and gloom of how bad everything is, and just pointing to examples of things that are going well and remember the things that have worked. And historically, cooperation has always, or has for a long time, been the norm. And even if things don't go as planned, there's always some sort of silver lining of what comes out of it. I think when I look at, why cooperation has worked in the Colorado River Basin for the past, 30, 40 years, it's largely because of experience with litigation going so poorly, is what I hear. And so just knowing that that experience of things not going very well led to a big period of time where people were a lot more willing to come to the table and cooperate to try to keep things out of the courts. And so maybe we can learn from past mistakes, or maybe we'll make little mistakes and continue to learn from those. But I think that there's a lot of scope for things to go well at the local level, and a lot of examples of things that can give us optimism when the things that are out of our control seem like they're going quite poorly. So that's where I'll leave my remarks.
I'm just
Optimism
going to jump
and
in
local
with
skill.
Gina, if you don't mind. I agree 100% with you, Gina. I think while it all looks like doom and gloom, I think in the moments of chaos is when leadership emerges. And I think you're already starting to see it in terms of the tri-state lower basins trying to put something together. I think you'll see it more, and not just from the lower upper basin dynamic. I think you'll see it throughout the basin. And these will be the people who have the ability to bring the parties together. Understanding what Jack has been talking about in terms of the upper basin, under no circumstances will we take any cuts, and da da da. We all hear it. The hard part is learning to hear it and overcome it. And I think there are people in the basin discussion who have that gift of gab, who have that gift of understanding and the gift of diplomacy, of being able to figure a way forward when there seems like none. And they will emerge. I know it's been trying, and I think it's going to become even more trying. But I think through this effort, you will see real leadership emerge. So that's my silver lining to it. I really do believe that we can get through this, and we will get through this, and we will come out it stronger in terms of the agreements that are reached to make this move forward.
Oh
Love
God.
it.
I am the last. We did not think this through. So let me talk. I'll say a few things, and then Gina and Mike, you got to come in
Can you
behind,
just cut them now, Jack? Can you cut them now?
because I'm gonna. This is like Debbie Downer, on SNL. So it's like I can't be last. Okay, so Gina and Mike, you got forewarned. You got to come back in and wrap this up, because I can't be the last. I can't be the last person. The discussion of where we go in the future right now is being argued completely in the wrong way. This hopefully will be the last time that we argue about this on the equity between the upper and lower basin. This argument is going to, the future of the Colorado River in the future is going to have to be argued in economic sectors, what's in the best interest of the United States for the part of it that's in the US, the future of agriculture, big issues like that. None of that's being talked about now. So I hope that, so we have a huge amount of work ahead. So Sonoran Institute, go for it. And every other NGO, go for it. You've got Gina, you're the future, everybody on this call who is young and energetic, we have left you one hell of a mess. And so go for that. In terms of the immediate crisis, John Ensminger from Nevada stood up at Crew and said, what do I think is going to happen? I think we're going to come up with a crummy little worthless 2 or 3 year kick the can down the road agreement. That's all we're going to come up with. Truth of the matter is, that's what I think we're going to come up with. And even the lower basin proposal only gets us 2 more years. But I would plead with everybody to think big and dream and think about the real issues. How do we get water to the Delta and get past utilitarian values only? How do we equitably deliver water from the United States to a poorer country who needs the water, and how to do it in the right way? How do we argue and think about the future of agriculture in the basin? And how do we manage the key environments of the river? And but in my desperate need for hope, um, if you want to look at a river that's really challenged, go to the Rio Grande.
Ah, he's
The,
changing subjects.
the
Jack,
Colorado, the
That's your
Colorado
hope.
River is doing much better than the Rio Grande. Why? Because there's big users downstream. And so I will be
no.
hopeful. No, I'm mostly
That
hopeful
can't
that
be
there's
it.
enough. I'm mostly hopeful that there's a bunch of young, energetic people who are going to work
Jack,
on this. There you go.
let me ask you a question. You've been doing this a long time. You've seen a lot of these dark corners. Tell us a story when it came out of a dark corner when you thought there was no way forward. You can do 2019, you can think
No,
2014
well,
Pulso. Well, give us a
yeah,
magic
no,
moment.
yeah, no, well, um, the single most, I mean, I was there at the basic Glen Canyon Dam when Secretary Babbitt opened the gates for the first
Hmm.
controlled flood, and I was one of the guys who dreamed that up. Um,
Hmm.
I've been, on the Rio Grande with Binational teams, and that is just one of the most wonderful experiences of my life. But nothing compares to being right there at that, at, being right there in the banks of the river at that tiniest little corner of Arizona, watching the city of San Luis turn out and go to the river. And I mean that was moving, and it brought tears to your eyes. And nothing was more. It's the most wonderful thing that I ever saw in my life, and it will stay with me for the rest of my life. And of course, 4 months later, there was no water in the river. But I have to believe that there is hope for that, because I was also at meetings decades earlier with Jennifer Pitt and others that people told her she was an idiot and a fool,
Hmm.
and yet that agenda could move. And so I have to believe that that can happen. And I would say that in for as much as I spend my life working in Grand Canyon, when I give talks, I always say the most important environmental issue in the basin is the Delta. It's not Grand Canyon. It's the Delta, and to do the right thing in the Delta. And it necessitates the most courageous decisions of all. And that's why all of you work on this binational issue. Keep at it, because it is the most worthy battle that exists.
I thought you didn't have a powerful ending for us, Jack. That was amazing.
Just so you know, we are recording. Um, and I'll make sure that last comment that you made, Jack, about if you look for hope for the Rio Grande, then you'll see the scale, the level of comparison of issues, and then we'll feel better about ourselves. That was great. Anyway, I want to thank Sam. Do you want to say a last word before we wrap up? Because it's 5:30. So are you still there?
Yes, I'm here now, just kind of enjoying the conversation and the same. I echo Jack's, Gina's, Mike. So we need to start or enter these conversations thinking that we can make it better. We cannot enter these battles thinking that we are defeated. So we enter this and we'll do our best, the best that we can. Are we gonna solve it or not? That's something different. But let's give it our best try, and we'll have at it. Mhm.
We will survive. Okay, thank you everyone to our
Thank you,
speakers, Jack,
Rosario. Great to see
Mike,
you.
Gina.
you.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you.
y'all.
Thank
Good to see you,
Randy
Jack.
also.
Yeah,
All
good seeing
everybody that
everyone.
everybody.
participated. Thank you. Thank you very
Hey,
much.
Marcia, good
Gracias.
seeing you.
Gracias a
Todos,
todos.
Ramón,
Adios.
Iris,
Thank you very
you.
much.
Elia andas por
Thank
ahí,
you.
Alfredo,
Bye.
We're gonna keep, wait for the next
Raquel.
one. We're gonna keep here, no matter what.